2021 had some very memorable titles, and sadly I was not able to play all of them, but I did want to mention a few that really managed to pull me in. So if I did not mention something that you thought was one of that year's best games, then please let me know in the comments. Now let's get started with the first game. Riffbreaker is one of 2021's most addictive games. It combines twin-stick action with extensive and substantial base-building components. It is a game that can look very overwhelming with all of the systems going on at the same time. But one of the best aspects to Riffbreaker is how its campaign builds a foundation and how the base-building and action works. But one of the best aspects to Riffbreaker is how the campaign builds a foundation and how the base-building and action works, and then continually adds more layers on top of it. This way you are gradually introduced to the new resources, buildings, and options. The base building has you considering your power level and resources that you need to mine. Power will be a constant thing you need to monitor, as everything will shut down if you have none. It is here where you need to see that there are different means to earn power. For example, you can rely on solar power, but then you're going to be burning through your reserves at night. Or you can opt to focus on wind turbines, but there are times where the wind is very low. Riffbreaker asks you to consider each of these situations and diversify your power generation. Resource gathering starts off rather simple and then turns more complex. For example, flammable gas can provide you with a good amount of power with the flammable gas power plant, but it needs a source for this gas to create that power. So this starts with finding a sludge pool. You then set up a pump that will give you sludge. You will need to then divert the pump into a building that converts the sludge into flammable gas, and then finally have a pipeline from the converter to the power plant, providing you with the end result of more power. You can use your resources to build new structures to open up a wealth of upgrades for your base building or your mech itself. The twin stick action is very good and offers enough customization to let you outfit your mech with weapons that suit your playstyle. The most exciting of the combat comes from the enemy waves that will happen periodically. You will get a warning that a large opposing force is coming in and which directions they are going to hit you from. Then you can use this information to set up defenses like walls and a variety of towers to prevent them from destroying your most valuable buildings. It is here the game turns into a tower defense game of sorts. These fights can be pretty big, so much so the game will often lag in them. Riffbreaker is an excellent game with a few flaws related to its performance, and an easy recommendation for those that want to get a lot of bang for your buck. It is a game that dangles the carrot in front of the player, and once you get that carrot, it replaces it with something new and interesting to work towards.
Okay, so we got fined. So we have a Nova tracking thing on our ship that's gonna shut down our engines if we don't pay that fine in 3 cycles. At least we're not on a prisoner transport.
Not yet.
Come on, guys. You're Drax the Destroyer, man. You killed Thanos.
Allegedly.
Are you gonna let a little fine slow you down? And Gamora, you're practically an MI6 agent, but way hotter and cooler. There's nothing you can't do.
Here it comes.
Rocky, you're an actual genius and the scrappiest dude I know. How many prisons did you break out of?
7.
You are Groot.
Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy was one of 2021's biggest surprises, and easily one of its best games. I had played the prior Avengers title, and while I did find some enjoyment with parts of it, it was a very flawed experience and should have been released in a better state. So this did not give me much confidence in the next Square Enix Marvel title. When Guardians was first shown, I thought it had some of the same story issues that I had with the Telltale game, where they were trying to just ape the films to cash in on the same audience. Plus the small moments of gameplay looked very ho-hum to me. After it released, I wanted to give this a try to see if I could confirm my initial comments. And man, did this game prove me wrong in every way. Guardians never feels like it's trying to mimic the films, but rather they are just using the same characters in a new and fresh way. I also had concerns of Eidos Montreal making this game, since I am still a bit bitter that Square has not allowed them to finish their Deus Ex trilogy. And while they are a great developer, I did not think this Guardians game was in their wheelhouse. Again, I was proven wrong and they were the perfect developer for the job. What really makes Guardians exceptional is the writing, story, and characters. Recently, AAA gaming can be a bit hit and miss when it comes to its writing, and in a few cases they opt to choose political pandering over well-developed stories and characters. Guardians is a AAA game that offers the very best in writing that you should expect from something of this budget. Each member of the crew receives good characterization and quality development. You care about each member of the team and the camaraderie camaraderie between each of them is fully realized and seen from the very start of the game. Guardians is consistently funny by offering some big laughs in its best moments, and a chuckle in its weaker ones. Another thing to note that unlike some of the Marvel films, the humor is not used at the expense of ruining some of the more dramatic moments. The drama and humor ebb and flow to create something you are laughing at and emotionally invested in. When it comes to the combat, it's not as strong as the writing, but it's still pretty good. The combat feels like a mainstream version of Final Fantasy VII Remake's combat system. You play as Star-Lord and can give commands to each of your party members to create some interesting combinations. There's some nice touches like being able to huddle up and inspire your team, and then enjoy the rest of the fight with a classic rock song. My main issue with the combat is that some of the encounters in the last fourth can be a bit tedious. I think allowing for you to switch to different characters offering new gameplay experiences could have prevented the combat from getting tedious. For simplicity, you play only as Star-Lord and issue commands. I think being able to control someone like Groot, who is a more melee-based fighter, could have provided something different in gameplay that is different from Star-Lord's guns. Even with these minor issues, this is an excellent 20-hour linear single-player campaign, and I loved it. This is one of 2021's best and overlooked first-person shooters. Severed Steel combines the shooting of Fear and the movement of Mirror's Edge to make an intoxicating gameplay loop. You can perform actions like diving and wall running to dodge enemy fire, so the game actively pushes you into performing cool-looking moves that benefit you. There's an interesting system of only being able to carry one gun at a time, and since your character only has one arm, they cannot reload. This means that you are always looking for your next weapon so that you can stay in the fight. Adding to this is how you can turn slow motion on at almost any time, providing you an edge over the overwhelming odds. Severed Steel has a short and sweet campaign, but the real meat of the game is found in the arcade mode, where it is endlessly replayable, meaning if you choose to tackle a level differently, it can play out in a whole new way. On top of this, you can make holes in the environment, so the experimentation is endless. I highly recommend Severed Steel.
On August 29th, 1997, Skynet, a computer system built to protect us, became self-aware. It viewed humanity as a threat to its existence and decided to act. Judgment Day, as we eventually called it, marked the beginning of the war against the machines. Skynet attacks happened almost daily, but the attack that happened on that day was like nothing we'd seen before.
While Terminator Resistance technically did not come out in 2021, the enhanced edition of it did, along with its expansion. I just wanted to use this as an excuse to talk about this game again, as I absolutely love it. It is very rare in entertainment for old franchises to come back and actually respect the original source material. The sequel trilogy for Star Wars was a disappointment in not respecting the legacy characters, and even looking at Terminator Dark Fate, where they ended up doing the same thing. Then a smaller company who made a mixed Rambo game tackled the world of Terminator from the place of a fan rather than trying to just continue it for the sake of profit. While I am sure that these developers wanted to make a profitable game too, it was apparent that Terminator Resistance is a game made by the fans for the fans. From the look to the characters, even the guns, all of this looks and feels genuine to Terminator 1 and 2. When it comes to the gameplay itself, it doesn't really break the mold, but delivers a solid first-person shooting experience. Guns feel great, the Terminators and other robots are fun to fight. The levels are a nice mix of linear and more open. The linear levels serve as your main set-piece sequences, whereas the open levels offers lots of exploration and even side missions to complete. The story was also a nice surprise as it effectively acted as a proper third film that ties in with Terminator 1 and 2, along with showing the future war. The expansion is just as great as you complete a mission with Kyle Reese that ties into the main game. Terminator Resistance is a good example of bringing an old franchise back and treating it with respect. When Final Fantasy VII Remake came out, I was a bit cautious as the original was the second Final Fantasy I had played, and really cemented my interest in the series. While there are good remakes that exist as modern retellings of classics, that do not replace the original but rather coexist and act as a way to get new players interested in the franchise. The recent Resident Evil games are a good example of this, treating their legacy characters with respect. Final Fantasy VII Remake ranks as one of the finest examples on how to do a remake very well, along with acting as a satisfying sequel to the original. I absolutely loved this remake when it was first released on the PS4, and with the additions on the PS5, it just gave me another excuse to play it again. The new takes on the classic songs were great. The combat system merged a more active action system with the classic ATB gameplay of the original, resulting in combat that is both engaging and flashy. But the most important element that the remake nailed were the characterizations of the cast. These were the classic characters that I remembered, and they acted like the originals, but now with modern presentation and voice acting. This is an element that remakes can often miss, but here it shows that the developers actually cared about the source material. My only issue was related to these lackluster looking ghosts that moved the plot in weird ways, and much of those elements felt forced. I understand that this factors into some of the sequel elements of this game, and I do understand that my opinion on this may change once more of the sequels are released. Much of this stuff is what I call Final Fantasy nonsense that I see in some of their other titles. But as I said, the most important aspect of the story they nailed, and that's the characterization, and it's great. On top of the PS5 upgrade, the new expansion released in 2021 was a nice and awesome addition. Yuffie was a visually fun character in the original, but she never really received much depth. But this expansion develops an interesting backstory to get us to care about her, along with her struggle and how it factors into the overarching narrative. There's also an addictive strategy minigame that has a considerable amount of matches and unlocks associated to it. The expansion provides an enjoyable original story and reaffirms what I enjoyed about the base game. Resident Evil is one of those franchises that I never get tired of, especially with its different phases, with the first few entries establishing survival horror, then switching to more action horror, and then going back to its horror roots. Like many, Resident Evil 4 was the game that made me love the franchise. I then went back to the older ones, appreciating the excellent level design and sense of fear, while Resident Evil 5 ditched the horror aspect mostly except in visual design. As an action-packed co-op game, it's really awesome, and while Resident Evil 6 seems to be a divisive entry, it is easily one of my favorites. While not very scary, I love how the game provided 4 distinct campaigns with a wealth of content for a linear game. I understood the switch back to a more grounded horror in 7, and while I did enjoy that game, it was personally not one of my favorites. It was missing one of the elements that I find very important to these games, the classic characters or new engaging ones. While Chris does show up for a bit in 7, he is not in much of it, and Ethan is the star of the show and someone who I did not get attached to. When Resident Evil 8 came out, I ended up playing it 3 times in a row because I enjoyed it so much. The game mixes in elements from 7 and Resident Evil 4 into something very fresh and intoxicating. The distinct zones and villains created engaging and very memorable levels to explore and fight through. Resident Evil 8 was more of an action horror, and I loved it for it. I also enjoyed the attempts to make Ethan a more interesting character, and to the game's credit, they did a better job with him here, but he is still weak at times. But I did like how Chris is in this game much more. My main flaws with this game came down to the writing. There is a lot of dumb writing to create conflicts between characters that feels more manufactured than natural story progression. Thankfully, the villains help to save the story. Resident Evil 8 has engaging gameplay along with being a love letter to many classic movie monsters. While I understand that some may not have enjoyed the pivot to action horror from 7, I couldn't get enough of it here. And before I conclude this video, I want to give a quick mention and recommendation to Splitgate. I initially was not interested in this game, as I haven't really dived into the free-to-play pool, but a video reviewer I watched covered it, and honestly it did look like classic Halo multiplayer. So I loaded it up and it felt and operated like Halo, resulting in a very fun game. And then when you factor in the portal element, the game gets really interesting. The portals allow for a lot of on-the-fly creativity to keep you coming back. On top of this, the game has received plenty of updates, like custom matches, bots, and much more. It is honestly impressive what this game provides to the player for free. So if you're looking for some classic Halo for free, give it a try. And that concludes the video. What were some of your favorite games from 2021? If you are interested in being notified of new videos, please hit the subscribe button and bell. And if you would like to support the channel and get early access to content, please check out my Patreon. All the links will be at the end of this video and within the description. And thank you very much for watching.